4, 3, 2.
Welcome to another literary reading, courtesy of the Alaska Quarterly Review and the Anchorage Museum at Rasmussen Center. We decided to extend our 40th anniversary benefit series because it was so inspiring to hear AQR contributors read their work and chat a bit. You can find the recordings of previous programs at our website, aqreview.org, and it's also on our YouTube channel. Today we have three outstanding novelists: Kristopher Jansma in New York, Gerri Brightwell here in Alaska, and Gregory Brown out in Maine. It's actually Jansma, but if we were in the Netherlands, it would be Jansma. Welcome. I'm Heather Lendy, the Alaska State Writer Laureate, and on behalf of the Center for Narrative and Lyric Arts, thank you for being here today. Kunaschish, as we say, where I am here on the banks of the snowy Chilkat River in Haines or Deschutes, Alaska, the homeland of the Tlingit, Chilkat Kwan, and Chilkoot Kwan since time immemorial. Also, I'd like to congratulate three Alaskans with new books out this fall: New York Times bestselling author Tom Kazaya's Cold Mountain Path, longtime AQR associate Rich Chapone has The Hunger of Crows, and AQR contributor Seth Kantner has just written 1,000 Trails Home. While this reading is free, AQR, like all literary journals, could use your help, so please consider a donation. And now I'd like to introduce my friend Ronald Spatz, the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Alaska Quarterly Review. Ron's a professor of English at the University of Alaska and a former National Endowment for the Arts Fellow and the recipient of 2 Alaska Governor's Awards and a Contribution to Literacy Award from the Alaska Center for the Book. And under Ron's over 40 years of leadership and vision, Alaska Quarterly Review has created strong connections between our state and the rest of the US and even the world, as well as presenting works that include a rigorous questioning of larger societal issues, and also as we're pretty proud of the fact that AQR publishes longer pieces, just like some of our contributors today, even novellas, and there's not a lot of journals that still do that. So, Ron?
Hey, thank you, Heather, and welcome everyone. As Heather said, you can find this event on our YouTube channel. It's being recorded today, and tell your friends about it if they're not able to tune in right now. I need to make a couple of announcements just at the beginning here. We acknowledge the Anchorage Museum for hosting and providing support for this event, and Web 907 for its web support, and the Center for Narrative and Lyric Arts, Alaska Quarterly Review's 501c3 umbrella organization, which makes this event possible. I also want to thank our friends at the 49 Writers for providing information about this series within their organization. I also want to make a land acknowledgement. Alaska Quarterly Review recognizes the indigenous land on which all Alaskans live. AQR is located in Anchorage, and Anchorage is Dena'ina homeland. Dena'ina is the language spoken by the traditional, present, and future caretakers of this land. Land acknowledgements opens a space with gratefulness and respect for the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspective of indigenous peoples, and marks our collective movement toward decolonization and equity. And now to begin, Heather Lendy will introduce today's featured fiction writers, Gerri Brightwell, Greg Brown, and Kristopher Jansma. Heather, as she noted, is Alaska State Writer Laureate for 2021 to 2023. She's the author of 4 books of nonfiction, all published by Algonquin. If you lived here, I Know Your Name, Take Good Care of the Garden and the Dogs, Find the Good, and her most recent book is Of Bears and Ballads. So over back to you, Heather, so we can get started.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have these three here today. It's going to be a great hour. I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody, and then we'll start. Gregory Brown is the author of the critically acclaimed novel, The Lowering Days, Harper, 2021. His stories have appeared in Tin House, Alaska Quarterly Review, Shenandoah, Epic, and Narrative Magazine. A graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop, he's received fellowships from the Breadloaf Writers Conference, the Napa Valley Writers Conference, the SUNY Writers Conference, and McDowell. The Minneapolis Star said that as a novelist, it's pretty great praise. He's half Louise Erdrich, half Barry Lopez, and, quote, writes a fluid lyrical prose that escorts us deep into the emotional lives of his characters. He lives in coastal Maine, where members of his family have lived and worked for nearly 4 centuries. He finds inspiration from very close to home, a yellow house, an old boat, fire, clearing in the woods. And he says that, quote, while fiction is primarily an act of imagination, it can hold echoes of all the people I've known in these towns, and perhaps some I carry with me but have never met. Genetic memory, after all, is a fascinating thing for a writer to consider. Kristopher Jansma is the author of Why We Came to the City, Viking Penguin 2016, and The Unchangeable Spots of Leopards, written in 2013 with the same publisher. He's winner of the Sherwood Anderson Foundation Fiction Award, a Pushcart Prize, and the recipient of an honorable mention for the Penn Hemingway Award. NPR has called him a brilliantly talented writer. He's written for the New York Times, the Chicago Quarterly Review, and has a novella in the summer-fall edition of Alaska Quarterly Review that should be out soon. It's a tad delayed due to COVID supply chains. He's also written for ZYZZVA, The Believer, and Prairie, Schooner, and writes the unfinished business column for Electric Literature. His work has been selected for the Best American Short Stories and the Best American Essays, and he's an associate professor of English and the director of creative writing at the State University of New York at New Paltz College. When Kristopher Jansma was in his mid-20s, he was the primary caretaker for his sister, who had cancer. They shared an apartment until she died. A year after losing her, he began to write about it. Of that impulse, he says, quote, I was still so angry and upset and lost, but I was aware that I had been through something really big and really serious that most people my age probably haven't had to deal with. Adding that part of him didn't want to learn anything from it, but, quote, that's sort of what I love about writing, is that it allows me to work through these things gradually. Gerri Brightwell's latest novel, Turnback Ridge, will be published by Torrey House Press in the summer of 2022. Her previous novels are Dead of Winter, which is a darkly funny book set in the interior of Alaska, and The Dark Lantern and Cold Country. Her short work has appeared in many venues, including Alaska Quarterly Review, Copper Nickel, and BBC Radio 4's Opening Lines. Her story, Williamsville, which originally appeared in AQR, was subsequently selected for the Best American Mystery Stories in 2017. Gerri was brought up in South Devon, England. After deciding a degree in zoology was not for her, she took up literature and art history and lived on a narrow boat in Bristol. She has also lived in Spain, Thailand, Canada, and the United States, and worked as a cleaner, ice cream seller, sandwich maker, pottery sponger, editor, and nanny. And she is currently the director of the creative writing program at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, where she lives with her husband, fantasy novelist Ian Cameron Esselmont, and their 3 sons. And Gerri, it's all yours. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much to Ron for organizing this reading. I'm honored to read in such illustrious company. I'm going to be reading for about 12-13 minutes. I'm reading 2 shorter pieces, a nonfiction piece that was published in Reader Vida in 2013 called Skirmish, and then a short piece of fiction. And please excuse my pronunciation of foreign words in these. You'll notice a slight trip when I come to some of them, perhaps. Okay, Skirmish. A certain excitement comes from exploring the edge of things. Perhaps that's why in 1994, my husband and I took jobs in Bangkok, and why, on our trip along the very north of Thailand and through Mae Sai, we decided to stay in a guest house overlooking the river marking the Burmese border. We imagined a view. How could there not be one? But the Sai River turned out to be a slick brown ribbon between low banks, and even this modest view was partially obscured by the bland new house across the road. As for the guest house, it was a huge plastered affair, reaching up 3 stories in a maze of rooms and bathrooms and balconies. After getting lost coming back from the bathroom, I memorized the route, left at the corner, left again at the wash basin set into the wall, sharp right to our room. We'd arrived well past midday, and the guest house restaurant was almost deserted. We took a table overlooking the road, despite the dust and smells of exhaust that drifted up to us, and ate fried rice under the clamor of a television tuned to CNN. By the time we left to explore the town, the afternoon felt flattened by the sun. We took pictures by the bridge into Burma. For all that it was a rather ordinary concrete 2-lane construction, and its Thai and Burmese flags drooped for lack of a breeze. A few other tourists were posing along the railings, but the stream of people passing behind us were locals headed to the high blue gate at the bridge's far end. Beyond it stood the Burmese town of Tachalek, with its grey buildings, its wide-crowned trees, its temple with its ornately layered roof, and for a backdrop, wooded hills fading into the distance. To come to the northernmost point of Thailand and stop felt incomplete, although we'd never intended to cross. Some colleagues at the international university where I was teaching had toured Burma and reported no evidence of the Slork government's heavy hand, no sign of people being forced to repair ruins for tourists to visit. They said they'd been surprised to find that people seemed content under the regime. A Burmese friend had been upset by their comments. Of course, they'd seen nothing, she said. Tourists weren't supposed to see what was going on, were they? Mae Sai had an off-kilter feel to it, as many border towns do. In truth, we had little to occupy us. We took our pictures on the bridge. We looked in a few shops. We walked the length of the main street and stopped for cold drinks. But for tourists like us, this was a town to pass through. As the afternoon heat thickened, we found ourselves outside our guest house once more. It was too soon to slip back into that strange world of CNN and menus in English. Instead, we followed the road along the river and kept going where it narrowed to a path between straggling bushes. Through the undergrowth, we glimpsed the forlorn river and its Burmese shore, so close we could have lobbed stones onto its bank. To our surprise, the further we walked, the more people we passed. In one spot where the bushes gave way to wispy grass, a knot of locals was staring across the water. A bend in the river, an elbow of exposed gravel. On it, an overturned military truck black with soot. From time to time in this area, there were skirmishes between the Slork army and drug lord Kun Sa, but right in town, only a recent attack would have drawn a crowd of locals, and that made staring at what was left of the truck ghoulish, but also undeniably exciting. There'd been an incident right here, an intrusion of chaos and danger into the quiet, ordered world that we imagine we inhabit. I carried that unsettled prickle of a feeling with me as we headed off along the path. A man might have been killed in that truck, perhaps several men on that ordinary stretch of gravel. This was how people died, wasn't it? In skirmishes with attackers or disease or other misfortunes that were soon lost to memory. Before long, the bushes had grown taller, the path narrower. The air hung more heavily here, but we pressed on until we encountered 2 men craning their necks to see past the bushes. Perched on the water's edge, a burnt-out Jeep was leaking smoke into the air. In an instant, everything was in uproar. From further up the path came shouting, a handful of men running, standing spread-armed amongst the weeds. Then a camera crew in fatigues was hurtling past us. In the rear came a long-chinned foreigner with a bandana around his hair and a heavy camera awkward on his shoulder. A few yards away, a barrel of a white man stepped into the path, middle-aged, sunglasses hiding his eyes, hands planted on hips. His trousers were camouflage, his hair cut soldier short. Through his t-shirt, the thickness of his arms and chest showed. He stared after the camera crew in an appraising way, his mouth busy with gum. There was no question of going further. We turned back, but I wish I'd asked someone, "What's going on? Do you know? Does anyone?" The sinking sun turned the plaster of our guest house a delicate orange. The air was cool in the restaurant. We took a table looking down on the road and drank sodas. On the television, Robert Frost was interviewing Margaret Thatcher. Along the street hummed motorbikes and small trucks so overloaded that they squatted on their axles. From across the river came the thin blare of canned military music and the occasional roar of a truck pulling up the hill. Otherwise, all was quiet, and what a quiet it was. Had people in Thatcher Lake shut themselves away because trouble was stirring, or did the town across the border always turn so still in the evening? It was dinner time, but I couldn't keep my eyes on the menu. I ordered a curry at random and turned back to stare across the river. It was nearly dark when a truck pulled up at the house across the road. From it jumped a dozen young men in black, some in running shoes, some in flip-flops, all of them with guns slung over their shoulders. Quick as mice, they disappeared into the building. Someone else was watching too. The man with the crew cut, shades high on his head now, still chewing. When night came, the town across the river vanished except for a few scattered lights. My husband and I sat drinking beer and eating our curries that had been slow in coming. The restaurant was packed now. How uncomfortably bright the restaurant felt, how conspicuous with all that light blazing into the darkness. I lifted my glass clumsily. My hand didn't quite feel like my own, and the beer, when I finished it, too bitter to be pleasant. I wiped my mouth. All around us floated chatter about visas and treks to see hill tribes, but beneath it all, I heard the dreadful quiet I'd been listening to all along, as though we were hanging on the edge of each moment. I wondered, if a mortar were launched from across the river, would we hear it before it hit? I imagined the table splintering apart, bodies hurled into the air. I made myself stop. We could have sat in the restaurant for longer. We could have ordered more beer or sodas or ice cream. The Thatcher interview was over and a news program had come on in its place. But my unease had made it difficult to sit and face the dark beyond the guest house. Never mind that our room upstairs was bare except for a bed, a small fan and a wooden chair, and that the light was too dingy to read by. I was in no mood for reading. I brushed my teeth at the wash basin cemented into the wall in the corridor, then locked our door. I lay beside my husband and wondered if tonight the world would end for us, or if not for us, for tourists in another room, or the young men holed up in the house across the street, or the soldiers across the border, and how easy and tragic it felt, as though we were all too slight to matter. Well, I'm going to read a maybe slightly less sad piece. This next piece was published in JMWW online last year. It's called Recipient, and I apologize for my lack of a proper Russian accent. So this is a piece of fiction. She's replacing a panel, hands ungainly in stiff gloves, intent on each twist of metal as she screws it out of its hole. This is how she was trained: to see only the metal glinting in her helmet's light, to ignore the massive hull of the space station over which she floats and the infinite space beyond. At the edge of her vision, something intrudes and she glances up. There's Krasnov working on the solar array, head slanted down, legs suspended at an impossible angle, but it wasn't him that caught her eye. Behind him, Earth's rising up like a colossal balloon. Queasiness stirs in her belly and she swallows against it. Out here, your sense of your own existence can become unmoored by your colleague dangling upside down, by your planet hanging overhead. She should look away, but she doesn't. Against the desolate monochrome of space, Earth's radiant. The Pacific's a heartbreaking blue. North America's decked out in greens and browns. Down there, impossibly far away, her tender husband, their toddling baby girl, their backyard with the swing set and peonies. And in that instant, her body understands. She's 250 miles up. Fear spikes through her and she grabs hold of a truss as though she might fall, as though she isn't already falling with the space station in its infinitesimally slow descent around Earth. Through her headset, Krasnov. Everything A-okay? His accent makes the word thing. She says, sure, I'm good, but her voice is tight. Distance had shrunken him to toy size, his suit bright against the shadow of the array. It's quite the sight, she says. Raslabsia. Sure, Raslabsia. She laughs, and he does too. When things go wrong, Raslabsia. When you freak out, Raslabsia. Relax, chill, take it easy. He gives a stiff wave, then slips into the array's shadow. It's like watching him vanish into a pool of dark water. She looks away and repositions herself over the panel. 6 more screws, only 6. She slows her breathing, focuses. Up here, time's accelerated. 45 minutes after the sun comes blasting over the Earth's rim, it dips away. By the time she looks up again, night is eating its way across West Africa, across a storm coiled over the Atlantic, and the world vanishes. Soon, darkness is pouring over the space station too. First one module winks out, then the next. Moments later, the panel's gone and her outstretched arm. Where it was, there's nothing. She flexes her hand. No resistance of glove against fingers, no sensation of muscles moving under skin. In front of her, nothing. When she turns, nothing, and panic flares up her throat. No gleam from a helmet light, no shimmer from long dead stars, only this absence of everything that ever was and ever will be. This is what it means for time not to have begun, for the universe not to exist, for panic to be pointless, and how easy it is to let go. Raslabsia, Raslabsia, Raslabsia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerri. That gave me a lot to think about. I think we've got, who's next? Gregory? Greg is coming up next. So Gregory Brown, take it away. It's all yours.
There. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Heather. Thank you for having me, Ron. And it's great to be here with you, Chris and Gerri. I'm going to read a passage from my novel, The Lowering Days. Came out earlier this year. And this passage comes about 5 chapters in. I don't think it needs much setup, though. I will say that the book is set in the Penobscot River Valley, a fictionalized version of that here in Wabanaki territory, in what we now call Maine. And it kind of follows the aftermath of a mill that's burned down by a teenager, a mill that's about to reopen, and she burns it down as an act of environmental defense and to prevent it from doing further harm, both to the land and several different communities in general. The man listened for the dawn birds returning to the trees and added wood to the fire. The logs were small and snapped in the soft gray light. There was an art to keeping a fire low enough to avoid notice, but warm enough to survive the night. While the bright, high sun blistered the days now in April, the temperature often struggled to escape the 40s still, and heavy snows drifted through their campsite. The man pushed up the coals in the fire where a flat stone was heating. He laid 2 gutted and filleted fish on the stones and listened to the fat sizzle. The campsite was surrounded by thick woods and set in the shadows of bald hills. Though they'd put leaves and branches over the tent to better disguise it and packed in bales of straw for insulation, it wasn't a home or a place for staying. Adam Greenwind found it insanely strange that he was sitting now over an early spring fire in the deep woods, essentially hugging an old Penobscot migratory route, trying to figure out what to make of his life now. 2 weeks before, he had stepped into the hallway of their little ranch house in the middle of the night and found his 14-year-old daughter, Molly, frantically packing a bag. She was terrified when she looked up at him. Out the hallway window, he could see the silhouette of the birch bark wigwam he and Molly had started building that fall for a tribal project about exploring family heritage. They'd raised the sapling frame and sheathed the structure, but they'd been unable to find or finish the wigwam before winter. While he'd spent all February and March talking excitedly at breakfast about getting back out to finish it, Molly's enthusiasm waned. Instead, in the mornings, her eyes continually fell on the unopened stack of bills and delinquency notices piling up on the table. When he moved the stack onto his dresser so she wouldn't have to see it each morning, she'd retrieve the bills, and put them right back at the center of the table. That was Molly, not one to let things be pushed into the dark. He had started getting dressed in his work clothes again as soon as he woke, even though there had been no work but odd jobs for almost 2 years now, since the mill had closed. It just made her more upset. "You can't fool me into thinking things are okay, Dad," she said. "I leave you behind and go to school every day, and you're just here alone. I hate it." The old grandfather clock working time in the living room was the only sound in the house that night. He thought he heard deer or raccoons scurrying around outside under the moon. He imagined Molly's horse, Cricket, curled up in her corral shelter, picking up the sound of the same night. He thought he caught the whine of sirens in the distance and began to really worry. Dawn was 2 hours away, and he understood that light would be no help to whatever was happening here. He grabbed his own duffel bag and began stuffing supplies into it, packing light, but packing smart. Molly stopped. "You can't come. See if you can stop me." He thought she might start crying, but then her face changed, shaking a little, pushing something far down. "I messed up. We all mess up. Stop acting easy, Dad. Stop acting cool. It isn't you." "Okay," he said. "Then tell me what happened." She had been honest with him. Now it seemed that nothing would ever be the same. A fire that practically took an entire mill to the ground in an evening. How had Molly done such a thing on her own? He hadn't raised his daughter to keep her head down and stay invisible. No, he'd raised her to have a backbone and act in defense of those who needed defending. But not this. Destruction, violence, those were angry ways, easy ways. He wondered now if it was his fault. Most of her life, Molly had watched him come home from the mill too tired to hardly think. While he tried to be careful, he had a big mouth, and it was just the two of them at home. Molly listening to him complain about how the paper company treated its workers, constantly putting more on them, skimping on safety supplies, slashing overtime, even canning free coffee in the employee lounge near the end. Listening to him rant about the chemicals and the waste and the awfulness of this mechanized world. Listening to him talk about how hard it was to know that your birthright was to caretake the earth, all while doing work that injured the river and traumatized the land. Now Adam listened to the woods around the camp, heard nothing, and grinned at the lie. Several peeled and cut ash saplings were stacked near the edge of the fire's light. Molly had spent all yesterday gathering and cutting the sticks to the right length for a fish weir. She was still asleep in the tent, and he knew that when she woke, she'd start measuring and fitting the weir together, wrapping the sticks with netting. He almost rose, but stopped himself. He could hardly go 20 minutes without checking to make sure she was safe. It reminded him of their early days together, when she was an infant and he lived for her first year of life in conflicting states of wonder and panic, amazed that such a tiny thing could exist in the world, and terrified that those tiny lungs and that tiny heart might at any minute stop doing exactly what they were designed to do and take her away from him. Somewhere to the west, a twig snapped. "No need to make it easy on me," Adam said, without looking up. "Quay, Moses." A figure stepped from the woods. He was tall, with a stone turtle pendant around his neck. He moved softly despite his age and the heavy pack on his shoulders. The stick was a stumble, not a courtesy. "How long have you been out there?" "Probably just as long as you think." The other man returned the greeting. "Quay, Adam." Adam blew into his hands, trying to take the cold from his palms. When he pointed to the pack, he said, "I didn't ask for any of that." "You're not the only one who needs to eat." Adam didn't think to question how Moses had found them. He had known someone would come, had known it would be Moses too, who had known him all his life. "Well, this is a pickle, isn't it?" Moses finally said. Adam laughed. Of all the phrases to spell out of his friend who spoke at least 4 languages. Oh, I don't know. He nodded to the fish cooking on a rock at the center of the fire. We got food, heat, no holes in the tent, no handcuffs yet either. Adam grinned. I'd like to keep it that way. Me too, Moses said. Molly, she's still sleeping. The older man moved to the weir sticks and lifted one, turning the tan wood in his hands. Where's she going to put this in? Beats me, somewhere with fish. It's a good weir. Should be. You taught her. Adam felt the unexpected edge in his voice, crackling in the air. You pick up a lot hanging out with an old Indian revolutionary while your dad has to go make a living. I see, Moses said. Adam paused, turned the fish on the warm rock, tried to calm his anger. Weliweni, he finally said, embarrassed at his disrespect. For the supplies, for coming. It's nothing. The man waved his hand through the dim light. What other things can I do for you? The precision of the phrasing was not lost on Adam. Not what do you need or how can I help you, but what other things can I do for you? What's your plan was the first thing most people would have asked, or are you okay? Adam appreciated that Moses had not. This isn't your mess to get caught up in, he told his friend. When did I ever ask you to be afraid for me, Adam? Pride has no place here. Stop being messy. Adam took a deep breath and released it. The directness of the rebuke felt good. Can you meet us at the house near dark? Adam asked after a while. 1 week from now? You're going back? There is no back. Moses put his hand on Adam's shoulder, but there's family still. Adam nodded. Bring your truck and the hitch that fits Cricket's horse trailer. I need you to find a place for her. I know someone, Moses said. Good people, discreet people. What else? What else do you need? But what was his actual plan? At the mill, he'd been immediately respected because of his ability to figure problems out. So come on, Adam. You were a carpenter and a nut for working on tape recorders, cars, and radios since you could practically walk. A draftsman and a welder, a foreman and a safety supervisor. Sure, you got driven out of a job, but you've got a lifetime of practical knowledge in that head of yours. So what's your plan? Stay out of sight as long as possible? Wait for the initial rage to calm down? Protect Molly. Find a way back to a normal life again, no matter how long that might be. If he was honest, he hoped for something he couldn't quite articulate, though. For the anger to pass, for the land to protect them, to find forgiveness on the other side of this all. It's not just Cricket, Adam said. We need to find somewhere to go for a while, too. He didn't want to take this trouble up the river any closer to the reservation, he explained. So it had to be downriver, toward the bay, where the waters widened. We can't come in, Moses, Adam said. He would do anything to keep Molly out of jail or the foster system, which to them were the same damn thing. What if we did, and what if I never got her back? He felt his face going hot at the idea, and he looked away. Moses Jupiter reached out and brushed the wetness from his friend's cheeks, and then hugged him. I know, Adam. It will get better. Manaka patake sakto haso. Don't forget to light a fire near the water. Don't forget to dance and to sing. Adam nodded at the tent. Hug Molly for me, Moses said. Tell her I'll bring waffles next time. Rock sizzled fish only goes so far when you're 14. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Greg. And last but not least is Kristopher.
Hi, thank you so much, Heather and Ron, the Alaska Quarterly Review and Anchorage Museum, and to Gerri and Greg. So I lived in New York City for about 14 years, and I just recently moved to the suburbs of New York City, not really very far outside of the city, even only about an hour. It's far from being, countryside. We moved here with our 2 kids in 2016. And after 14 years in the city, I felt perfectly safe every minute that I lived there. Loved it. Never worried for anything. And after arriving in the suburbs, immediately began to feel constant threat of death. And this is sort of where this story came out of. So this story is it's actually a novella, and it's told in fragments. And I think hopefully the content will match the form here. So this is called Like a Bomb Went Off. The neighbor's house explodes. The neighbor's house explodes at 5:05 p.m. Harriet is behind the family station wagon, vacuuming a summer's sand out of the trunk. There is an incredible noise, like something collapsing to the ground. She looks up to see a white cloud rising behind the fence. Warm air rushes by as bathwater. There is no fireball. It was like a bomb went off, she'll soon say, for the first time, even though it is not like that at all. Pre-foreclosure. Harriet and Vish moved to Westchester from Brooklyn with Clara and baby Theo 2 years before the explosion. The only hesitation is the neighbor's dilapidated house. Vish jokes it is a meth lab, but the realtor assures them that it is just neglected and in pre-foreclosure. Later, online, Harriet finds no proof of this at all. Vish shrugs. Maybe we're all in pre-foreclosure, if you think about it. They decide to email the older couple they're buying the house from, asking what they know. The 3 sentences Harriet receives back curl in her mind like a poem. Luis has been there 20 years and raised 3 girls. He has a son still in school. Once, when I was doing some work on the roof, he came over to help hold the ladder. A broom. 10 seconds after the explosion, Harriet is at the top of her driveway. Cars have stopped in the street, which is bathed in shattered glass, the twisted frame of a screen door, and part of a fence. Harriet takes out her phone and dials 911. As she does, an orange sedan begins honking furiously. The sound startles her, a brighter, louder interruption than the explosion had been. A man gets out of the car, face red, waving his hands wildly and screams, "Get a broom!" Harriet stares at him, utterly blank. What? Come on, lady, get a fucking broom! She just stands there, unable to process this command. The man screams again, exasperated. With both hands, he pantomimes pushing a broom in the direction of the broken glass like she's stupid or something. 911, what's your emergency? But Harriet still can't speak. This man is so angry, so ridiculous that she simply cannot. The fuck is wrong with you? Flecks of actual spit fly from his mouth. Maybe Harriet considers he doesn't understand what has just happened. This house just blew up, she explains, voice unnaturally high. What she means to say is that this is not a problem that a broom will solve. 911, what's your emergency? Hi, I'm sorry, my neighbor's house just blew up. It was like a bomb went off. Fucking get a broom, the man howls one last time. And then, deciding she's useless, he begins to kick at the broken glass and twisted metal with his foot, pushing it with jerking swipes. Harriet turns and looks at the fence, which has been knocked flat over. Through the waist-high grass, she sees nothing, no house, just a heap of splintered wood and cotton candy insulation. Ma'am, did you say your neighbor's house blew up, ma'am? Yes, I'm here. Yes, it blew up. It's completely gone. There's a heavy slamming of the car door as the man, having decided he's done enough, revs the engine and peels through loudly as if to make his final point. Horrendous, the crunching under his tires, but he gets by. How dare this house blow up when he was trying to drive down the road? How dare he be delayed, 30 seconds now at most? Stuck out there with some lady who can't even get a broom. Faulkner. Not long after Harriet and Vish officially move in, Luis comes smiling over to that same fence during a moment of mutually occurring yard work and welcomes them to town. He and Vish shake hands and chat about baseball. Luis apologizes for the starry state of his yard and mentions his wife in a hospital somewhere. He confesses he just can't keep up with it all on his own. Vish is deeply moved by this. He's sold. Luis is a good man, trying to lead a simple life out here in a world that no longer stands for all it used to. He reads a lot of Faulkner, Vish does, and collects Bob Dylan bootlegs. Harriet remembers she used to like this about him. Vish tells Luis that he works in construction, which is only half true. Vish works in HR at a company that does construction. He used to tell people he was a poet stuck in a desk job, but that won't fly here the way it did back in Brooklyn. and Vish has figured that out already. Banco. By the time of the explosion, it has been months since Harriet has seen Luis around. Since the start of summer, there has been no sign of him or his son. Only a strange man, a renter, or possibly a squatter, speaking only Spanish and disturbing everyone else on their street by sitting out by the road in a folding chair and enticing passing trucks to honk their horns. Harriet thinks it's funny. In the local moms group on Facebook, there's a whole horrified thread about it. But one day, the renter leaves a pink stuffed bear by the fence for Theo. Harriet takes it straight to the trash. The renter eventually comes to the fence to wave guileless hellos to Harriet. When she asks about Luis, the man responds with an onrush of Spanish she cannot follow, and then he says the word banco, gripping both hands around his own windpipe, and this she understands well enough. The pre had become post, all in good time. An attractive nuisance. That first year, whenever friends and family come up to visit the new house, they inevitably comment on the neighbor's place. There's much speculation about meth being cooked in there, much talk of it dragging down Harriet's property value, much examining of the backyard, which is strewn with old junk, a rusty swing set, an upside-down riding mower, an aluminum shed with a collapsed roof. In the summer, the grass grows wild all around it, going up to Luis's armpits. Then he collects a few men to spend an afternoon mowing it all back down again. Harriet suspects there is ragweed in all that wild grass and that it is causing her allergy attacks, but what can you do? There are things she knows that you can do. Harriet's father, during one visit, tells her to call the town and report the overgrowth, to file a complaint about the collapsed shed being an attractive nuisance and insist it be torn down. That's not a thing, she says. It is too. One day, Clara will go over there and climb around to get tetanus, and look. He points to the several trees that have fallen on the property. One is stuck precariously in the branches of another tree at a 45-degree angle to the ground, just waiting for a strong wind to finish the job. What if that falls the wrong way and goes into your yard? It's leaning the other direction entirely. But her dad just tut-tut-tuts and stares out, watching as if it might come down at any moment. She ignores him. She simply cannot bring herself to imagine that it is any of her business. Vish agrees. People don't understand the choices other people have to make in the grips of poverty, he says, as if he knows. But whatever, she basically agrees with him. Not their house, not their problem. Since this was all trees. Only now, suddenly, there is no house, just a dust cloud lingering, just the memory of the warm air and the tremor that moved under Harriet's feet. The other neighbors come outside from all the way down the road. It isn't long after the cars begin moving again that Harriet becomes aware of an older black man standing across the street. She's never seen him before. He doesn't seem like he gets out of the house very often. But seeing as they're both standing there, staring at the same thing, she crosses between the rubberneckers and waves. He introduces himself as Peter. That used to be a nice house, Peter says, turning to face the debris. A Polish couple built it when I was a boy. They lived there 40 years before Luis bought it from them. You've been here a long time then, she asks Peter. Since this was all trees. He waves towards the much nicer development behind them. I hadn't realized that was so new. Oh yes, only maybe 20 years now. That doesn't seem very new at all to Harriet, but she reasons if they stay in this house until Theo is grown, it will be about as long. Their own house by then will be 100 years old, if it makes it that long. Houses, she is coming to understand, are not permanent things. What do you think happened? She asked Peter, pointing to the wreckage. Lazy son of a bitch let it all go, didn't he? Harriet realizes he's still looking at all this with a much wider lens than she is. I meant just now. Why do you think it blew up? Fire trucks are coming now, siren sounds moving towards them louder every second. More and more onlookers are arriving, clustering to their left and right. Peter grumbles. I heard someone over there this morning. I bet that asshole just turned on the gas and walked away. Nobody would do that, Harriet wants to say. Luis certainly wouldn't, not when he knew that she and her family, her small kids, were right there next door. There's a crowd now watching the firemen put on their boots and unroll long hoses, though there's no fire to put out, so they remain flat and limp. Meth lab, someone nearby speculates. That's why there was no fire. Since when is everyone such an expert on meth labs? There's a TV show she knows, Vish likes it, about some ordinary suburban dad who secretly becomes a drug kingpin. The other day, that storm hit, I saw the house get hit by lightning, screwed up the wiring inside. They're all talking to Peter now, whom they seem to know. Harriet doesn't know any of these people at all. She feels suddenly like some random bystander. That's my house right next to it, she explains to someone. I was outside when it happened. It was like a bomb went off. Voicemail. Harriet realizes that the fire trucks are going to block her driveway if she doesn't hurry. She rushes back to the station wagon, still parked behind the house, trunk still open, the engine running to power the portable vacuum cleaner still going inside. She yanks the cord out, closes the trunk, and guns it out of her driveway just before the ladder truck gets in the way. As she heads to gather Theo from daycare, she leaves Vish a voicemail. Hey, hon, it's me. I just need to tell you, so you don't worry if you hear from someone else, that the neighbor's house just exploded, and I'm fine. And I haven't seen anyone over there in a month, maybe. But anyway, I'm fine, and our house is fine. But the other house blew up. It was like a bomb went off. I was standing right outside when it happened. I'm getting the kids now, and we'll meet you at the train station. We'll grab some pizza. Give me a call when you can. Train station. An hour after the neighbor's house explodes, Harriet sits at the little pizza place across from the train station, preventing Theo and Clara from doing too much damage as they excitedly hop around. There are news helicopters in the sky now, hovering over by where she knows her house is. It was like a bomb went off, she has now told Theo's teacher, as well as the lady who runs Clara's after-school program. They looked at her like she was making it all up. Houses did not just blow up. But now, Harriet hopes they'll see. It'll be on the news tonight, local at least. She's looking through the window, watching trains roll in from the city. Vish is coming. He texts her to check that she's okay. He says he didn't get her voicemail. The neighbors have all been texting him. He was incredibly worried. She texts back, I left you a voicemail. Why didn't you call? He responds, I was in a meeting. Next time, send a text. Oh, okay. Next time the neighbor's house blows up, I'll do that, she thinks. I was in the car. He writes, I'm glad you're okay. Why don't the neighbors text her? But she knows. Vish is the friendly one who meets people at the park and says, let me get your number so the kids can get together. Harriet gets the sense from the other mothers that this is not how it is supposed to work. Vish should not be asking them for their numbers, should not be setting up play dates. This is her job. Their husbands, Harriet suspects, won't love seeing Vish's number in their phones. What's your wife's name again? They're always asking him. And Harriet doesn't love the thought of all their numbers in Vish's phone. Mary's mom, who then just becomes Cheryl, then Benny's mom, who just becomes Katie. It is a problem. Harriet knows this. But she never thinks to ask when she sees people at the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. Back in the city, it was always just, hey, are you be around tomorrow? And people would say, yeah, let's get something on the calendar. And that was all that needed to be said. It was enough that everyone wanted something on the calendar. Here, they actually whip out their phones and start rambling about all the activities their children are booked in every day and how stressful it is, and ask rhetorically when they are supposed to get their nails done. They always seem to be done, Harriet notes. They want you to ask them to go get manicures, Vish explained once. I hate getting my nails done, she'd said, studying her hands. Painted up and polished, they never looked like they belonged to her. Who wanted to walk around with someone else's hands all day? Just then, someone comes over from the counter at the pizza place. It's a woman Harriet half knows, Clara's friend from school's mother. Maybe her name is Joan? Don't you live near that house that blew up? I just texted Vish. Harriet shakes her head and widens her eyes. Is this how she's supposed to look? This is how they look all the time. Oh my God. That's our neighbors. I was standing right outside. It was like a bomb went off. Before she can say more, Vish comes up in a rush. Joan or whoever looks relieved to see him. She grabs his shoulder, pats at it. She was just telling me what happened, she says, as the kids, oblivious to all of it, leap up and try to tackle their father to the table. What's your name again, by the way? Living here. The look these women have, a little afraid always. Harriet is meant to be afraid of a lot of things, considering it is one of the more affluent suburbs in the state and the whole nation. The local dads here are not secretly meth kingpins. The crime rate is essentially a negative number, and the people are also nice, though they don't drive nicely. And they often yell loudly into their phones, and sometimes while they're driving. But she's not afraid of these people, who she assumes all have better things to do than worry about her. Though some other things do vaguely alarm her. Deer ticks, which she combs around for each day after the kids get inside. And there are signs up all over about what to do if you encounter a coyote. And one time she saw one in the thin morning light the size of her car. And then every year there are quite a few sightings of a large bear moving through the area. And this time he was affectionately named Mr. Quakey after the numerous appearances he'd made along Quaker Road. And earthquakes? Apparently. Someone just casually mentioned this to her at the grocery store. Isn't it incredible they would put a nuclear power plant so close to a fault line? I'm sorry, a what? Next to a what? Oh yes, well, that's why she got a form from school in the first week asking, is it okay to give KI pills to Theo in the event of an emergency? What for, she asked, what's that? KI, potassium iodide, the woman in the toddler room explained. For if there's a meltdown over there. She waved vaguely towards the woods. Oh, Harriet had said. Well, do the pills do anything? I don't know, the woman answered. I guess. Sure, okay, Harriet had sighed. Load them up. All right, this is the last one. News 12. The road is closed to traffic by the time they get back to the house. Initially, the policeman in his neon vest refuses to let them through, but Bish politely points out they have 2 children in the back, and the officer waves them past. He tells them they'll need to walk along the edge of the road because there are emergency vehicles everywhere. This house exploded and sent live wires right in the street. It did? Soon enough, they see for themselves a mess of cables on the road. Harriet, now carrying a shoeless Theo in her arms, realizes she must have run right past them. They'd been there, black electric death snakes, inches from her feet as she'd been calling 911, and as the man had been yelling about brooms. No chance to absorb this before a reporter with a News 12 microphone approaches and asks her if she knows anything about what happened. I was standing outside when the house blew up, she said. It was like a bomb went off. She's aware of having said this phrase a dozen times by now, and that it is just as inaccurate now as it was at first, but she can't think of anything else to say. You mind if we come into your yard and get the damage from the back? Harriet leads them down the driveway. Vish and Clara follow, still holding shoeless Theo. Harriet pauses to point to where her car had been and where she'd been standing. There was this warm breeze, she explains. I didn't see a fireball or anything. There's glass, the reporter comments. Where? Here, everywhere. They look down together. Harriet, Theo, the reporter, and a large, expensive-looking camera. There is indeed broken glass all over the driveway, some just inches from where she'd been standing when she'd felt the warm breeze. Harriet reaches down and picks up a jagged piece the size of her head. She stares at it for a moment, studying it as if it has secret writing on it somewhere. Holy shit, Vish says, moving Clara away. Honey, you could have been killed. Harriet hums. It certainly seems that way, though it does not really register. If you want to go in the backyard, she tells the reporter, you can see better. I'll stop there and read the rest in the upcoming issue of Alaska Quarterly Review.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I was laughing out loud because Harriet's a lot like me, I think. And the worry, and wow, thank all of you. We have a few minutes, and what we like to do kind of at the end is maybe pose a thought or a question and have you all just give your thoughts or talk to each other a little bit about it. And the one thing that stuck with me, I'm still thinking about Greg's thought about genetic memory. And I'm also thinking about the stories that we heard today that each of you shared, pieces that looked at disaster in different ways and fictionally. And I'm just wondering if maybe you might want to have a little conversation about where that comes from and how you handle that. If for instance, the things that you wonder or afraid of, being stuck in a space station, or your child, taking this extreme action, or the neighbor's house blowing up like a bomb. If writing is a way to address those things, to write your way out of those, and I don't know, I won't keep you too long because I know you're all busy and really appreciate you being here, but I'd love to hear each of you and your thoughts on that. And you can decide for yourselves who wants to jump in first. I'm not going to really moderate. I'm just going to let you all talk.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in real quick. I was talking about kind of this same thing with a friend of mine who's a poet, Ross White. He's a great poet, and he teaches down at North Carolina Chapel Hill recently. And we were talking about how we're kind of astonished at how dark our work is when it starts. All of our work continually starts from these really dark places, but we've been noticing them going towards more of a place of joy, which has been a kind of a nice shift. And I've noticed in my own life, like as my life has gotten better and better and filled with more joy, my work still starts in these kind of dark places, like attacking disaster or tragedy. And I think like some of that is it's inherently dramatic. That's one reason we might gravitate towards it as writers. But I do think it's a way, for me at least, of kind of getting out the things or processing the things that I'm most scared about, so they kind of don't take over my life and start infringing on that real joy that I have around me. So it's cool that you bring that up, because it's been around me this week in other ways.
Yeah, if I jump on that, I found a lot of the same. I obviously I think I've had more anxiety since becoming a parent, of course, now that my children are out there, sort of in harm's way all the time. I never used to be that way, really. And, as Heather pointed out before, I'd gone through something when I was younger where my sister got sick, and that was sort of very sudden disaster, sort of, but coming through the other side of that, I remember feeling sort of like invulnerable in some strange way. And then, then moving to the suburbs where, in theory, people go to feel like they should be safe. I certainly started feeling the exact opposite way. And I've been thinking about the genetic memory thing that you brought up, Greg, because that's one of the ways that I've been sort of trying to explain it to myself, that it's not all my anxiety. It's like, generations past, carried along somehow.
When I was looking through my work to think about what I was going to read today, I was thinking none of these are particularly happy stories, and which ones are maybe less miserable. I have had people comment how very dark my work is, which surprised me because I didn't think it was that dark. I thought we all had these thoughts in our heads, but apparently not everybody does. I suppose, like with the both of the pieces I read today, it's almost like these moments of danger or possible danger are like a portal into a slightly different existence where everything's heightened, where things are different. And I think that's what I find really valuable about those moments of intensity. And that, I think, is why I'm drawn to them. And apparently so are Chris and Greg as well. The world changes slightly. It's like it tilts a bit on its axis when things go wrong. And that's compelling to write about. I think it's also in some ways kind of difficult to write about because you want to avoid the melodrama, but it's such wonderful material to chew over.
Well, yeah, thank you all. And it's just fantastic. The hour went by so fast this time. That doesn't always happen. So that's to the readers' credit. And I do want to thank everybody else for joining us today for this literary series. And on behalf of the Center for the Narrative and Lyric Arts, all our gratitude for the generosity of today's writers, Kristopher, Gerri, and Greg. And you can support them by buying their books at your local bookseller. And also to Cody Carver and the Anchorage Museum at the Rasmussen Center who produced this program. And if this was something that was important to you, please consider making a donation to AQR so that you can continue to read it and so that you all can continue to hear writers like the ones we heard today. Their voices are more important than ever. And Ron, the last word is yours, always.
So I want to thank the three of you again, Gerri, Greg, and Kristopher, for supporting us by reading today, but also for the pleasure and the honor to publish your work. When I saw the work come up, I knew there was something special, whether a bomb went off or we had a strange mystery set in the West. It didn't matter. Something very special, and your support is invaluable. So thank you again for participating. Heather, as always, you're an Alaska treasure, and we're so happy that you've agreed to take the lead on moderating our series. So I'll end by just saying next Friday is another event. We have 2 a month for the rest of the what we'll call the academic year, if there's such a thing of an academic year. So we'll have 1 more in November, 2 in December, 2 in January, 2 in February, 2 in March, and 2 in April. So next Friday, we have a poetry event featuring Michelle Britton Rosado, Marie Tozier, and Amber Flora Thomas. It's going to be a really, really wonderful poetry event. So I'm excited about that. Again, I want to thank our readers and Heather, and look forward to you all joining us next Friday. So